Thank you, Ms. Chu. And you, I think we shared a little bit of surprise at the fact that nobody had ever seen a commercial market representative. Staff informs me there are 35 or 36 of them nationwide, many of them part-time, overseeing $200 billion worth of contracts. So not a surprise that you haven't seen them yet. Ms. Borromeo, let me press you on one issue, because I did read the submission from the Asian American Justice Center, and I'm more than willing to consider that the possibility for discrimination exists. I used to work with large contractors building roads and bridges and so forth, and you certainly did not see a lot of women-owned businesses out on those jobs. So again, I'm willing to entertain the possibility that the potential exists, but are you saying that you're seeing evidence of discrimination based upon the fact that groups are a particular race or creed or gender, or is it because do you believe you're being discriminated against based upon the size of your company?
I think it's both. I think small businesses in general, based on size, all experience this, but I think it becomes even more complex when you have cultural or linguistic barriers that don't allow for you to communicate your point as well as maybe other vendors would. So I think small businesses as a whole are not being treated very fairly in this space. But when you add, like I said, the cultural and linguistic aspects to it, it becomes very difficult. And if you also don't understand how government works, they would be they'd be afraid to talk to you right now. You know, thinking that you're gonna hand them over to the police.
Don't feel bad. Yeah. One of the traditional ways we try and deal with that is by trying to make the process as neutral as possible. Having been through the subcontracting process, do you see places where we can change the process in order to remove the potential for discrimination based upon race or gender?
I think employing more folks in the federal government that would understand the cultural nuances of some of these folks. I think that if you have people that understand, you know, how a person grows up or how they communicate, you know, it's increasing the diversity within the space, hiring more women, hiring more minorities to represent in the contracting space would make it much easier.
Let me go through a sort of a real-world scenario. Let's say I'm a prime contractor, and I've got a Department of Defense subcontract, and I'm looking to subcontract some of it out. I may post it on various websites and so forth. I don't understand the exact logistics of that. But at some point, I'm going to receive a bunch of inquiries, either in paper or over email or so forth. Is there some part of that process that says, oh, wait a second, it allows me to say, that's a woman-owned business, that's an Asian-owned business? Is there something that's broken in that system?
I believe that they're not collecting data at this point regarding who's a minority or who's a woman. So that's one issue. The second issue is they're not posting these things. So you don't even know that a subcontracting opportunity exists except within your own little network. And it's when the prime contractors let you in. You have to hobnob in the same circles with them. And it can cost a whole lot of money to go and network with them. And you just have to have the connections. And if you're not familiar with a culture or with a language or, you know, things like that, or you're not comfortable interacting with another gender, then it might be very difficult to make that.
If we had more time today with Mr. Jordan, we would have pressed him on some of the shortcomings that we've perceived in the SBA regarding the postings and the making information available. Ms. Segley, you looked like you had some input on that process as to where it might be improved.
I actually, just from a support standpoint, one of the pieces from a governmental perspective to support what Jamie just shared is the passage of the Women's Set-Aside program. So the government's admitting that there's gender bias within government procurement. So I just wanted to bring that up as a resounding support point to her case.
And again, I'm willing to admit it. I'm trying to fix it through the process. Again, if you gave me a document, if you made an application for a subcontract on my prime, and the name of your business was ABC Subcontracting, it's unlikely that I would ever know that you were a woman-owned business, is my point. So, again, I'm willing to admit that the potential is there. I'm just trying to figure out at what point in the process you let people know you're a woman-owned business so that you can be discriminated against.
Well, maybe when they're looking for these subcontractors, they could ask if they qualify for any of these set-aside programs or if, you know, they're a DBE. So, number one, let's post it on Subnet. I went on Subnet and I actually talked to Joe Jordan's office about it, and I said, you guys only have a couple hundred subcontracts posted on this. I said, is there a more robust database that I can go to for this? Oh, everything's posted on FedBizOpps. It's not posted there. And I talked to a prime contractor, large defense contractor, who told me that they're not required by the federal government to do that. So, and they just don't like your system, so they're not going to do it. They have their own system of identifying qualified contractors.
And I think that's, if I may, back to the compliance issue. Many of the large primes do follow similar compliance to the socioeconomic standards that are out there. So they go for a certain percentage of 8As, a certain percentage of women-owned businesses. So they're out there, and very frequently, directly to your question, when we receive an RFP from one of those large primes, there's a checkbox that says which of these socioeconomic standards or set-asides do you file under. So you check women-owned, you check small business, what have you. So right up front, very often, you announce where you fit. I think it goes back to compliance, though, if I may, in that there's no teeth that says that we need to actually implement the diversity that we're asking for. So we're starting to ask the questions and the information is being shared, but there's no compliance that says that we actually adhere to those levels.
And it strikes me, I know I asked the question, but it struck me as you were giving your answer that there's a catch-22 here, which is there is a requirement that's a target. I think, I can't remember if it's 3% or 5% for women-owned business, certain for service-disabled veterans, and so forth. And in order to meet the requirement, you're required to disclose that you would fall into those categories. So again, you're in a catch-22. If you want this completely blind test that would not allow discrimination, you wouldn't be able to satisfy the requirements of the requirements that we've set. Interesting issue. Ms. Biseglia, very briefly to you. You talked a bit about the transparency and about the small business plan not being shared with you. I'm sympathetic to that, but I've also been a subcontractor, I've been a contractor. It'd be rare that I would share information about my contract with my owner with my sub. Not typically something that I would do. What would you be most interested in seeing in that if you had your will?
If I had my will, I'd be most interested in seeing the part of the response that affected me. So how were they measuring the success of my relationship with the prime? And you're right, even as a potential prime contractor, there may be subcontractors that we share information with and some that we don't.
Right.
I mean, again, from a small business to a small business, there's a bit more, the relationship's a little bit different than a very, very large business. So I can absolutely accept that. But I think understanding, if the prime contractor is going to be held to a level of compliance based on how they're dealing with me, it'd be nice to have a voice in that fight.
Agreed. Go back to the specifics of the contract that y'all dealt with. Did they breach the contract with you? I mean, and the reason I ask, and it's completely off topic perhaps why we're here today, is we've had some insourcing hearings this year, and we've heard testimony about folks getting kicked off of contracts, and one of the questions I always ask is, did they breach the contract? Did the contract terminate? What were the grounds under which they were allowed to displace 5 of your folks?
I don't know. What I was told is that the folks, all 5 of them, were not working out, and they were instantly replaced with 5 of the prime's people. So again, from our standpoint, it would have been nice to know what was reported to anybody managing the subcontracting plan. One, from just a referenceability from my own company. From the contracting, the people, all 5 of those people had worked on previous contracts for me with it, never a problem, so it was a surprise. And the larger surprise, back to our wish and our desire to understand the compliance with the subcontracting plan, is that it was swift. It was, your people are gone in less than 5 days. So it wasn't, this isn't working out, we need to change it. It was just very quick, and they replaced with their own people. So it was all Department of Defense work. My guess is that it was a budgetary situation, but we don't know, which again is why we're asking for the transparency and the understanding of the compliance of the subcontracting plan.
All right. Thank you for that. And because again, it strikes me that you have a contract, and I could never just break my subcontract with my subcontractors unless the contract allowed me to do so. My last line of question relates to the experience you had in transitioning from a sub to a prime. How did you find it generally? Was your experience as a sub helpful to you when you tried to do it? And are there things you learned as a sub that have made you a better prime contractor? dealing with your own subs.
Right. So the only 2 prime contracts we have right now are very large IDIQs, and we've not gotten billable work. They're relatively new for us. And right now we have 3 proposals to be prime contractors. So we have not been awarded as a prime yet. As far as the process, the one thing I will share with you is, and I'll tell you, one of the bids that we have in right now is with a very, very large contractor as a sub to us. And the other 2 are with mid-tier or smaller businesses just because of the work. And the one thing that's actually I've been educated on is a lot of what I shared here in the testimony. It was very easy for me to be here today because we have a very different relationship with our subs on these bids, as well as the ones that are on with the IDIQs, than we have had with our primes in the past. And part of it is the transparency and the working relationship that we're trying to foster. So it's kind of like, be the change that you want to see. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that we've learned. So we're already implementing a lot of that transparency with our subcontractors and hope and look to continue that once we get awarded the work.
The past performance report, did you find it to be a fair process? Did you find it to be helpful to you? Did you find it to be a hindrance?
As far as filing our price performance?
Right.
I think it's just, we're fortunate. We've been in business for 6 years, and I've been in the same industry for over 20. So from a past performance standpoint, we're very, very fortunate in the fact that we can definitely stand on our own laurels. So it's a lot of paperwork, but I think it's fair in the fact that it's pretty, again, to Jamie's point, it's pretty blind as far as that's concerned. It's a standard template. You fill it out, you put your point of contact so that they can check everything. And for us, it's been fine.
Would you have been able to go straight to prime contract, or would you have to have gone through the sub programs in order to qualify?
It depends on the contract. Some of them need specific relevant past performance. Again, because the way that I'm building my company, all of my people have at least 10 to 15 years experience in this industry. So I'm a little bit of an anomaly in that standpoint. I think that the benefit of coming in as a subcontractor is that I had the ability to learn a lot of what it takes to be a federal government contractor on somebody else's time, if you will. And we've been able to foster some of the relationships that are going to make us much more successful going forward.
Have either of you ladies participated or know anybody has participated in the mentor programs?
I was actually just going to say that. One of my clients has been with the DHS Mentor Protege program for a year, and there's no extra merit in being part of that program.
Yeah, we've actually done Department of Defense and DHS, and I would absolutely agree. I think
You're there for show.
Well, I think that what I've seen, and I actually attended the Mentor Protege conference, and I think that what I saw was that, and this again, this all is in Teros, I think that the programs largely came out of being product companies. So if I wanted to sell product to the government, and so the Raytheons and the Boeings and those sort of company have very, very successful programs. We're services, and I think it's a little bit more difficult. And a clear example is that our mentor in the Department of Defense program, we thought it would work because they understood what we do for a living, yet then within their own company, there was a stress factor of why should we bring in a sub because that takes work away from us. And we're not an IT company, we're a supply chain company. So if you can only imagine with as many IT contractors you have in this area, that issue is all over the place. So I think that what I've heard from peers that have been part of the program, if you're with one of the larger that started as a product and move over to services, that they have seen a lot of success. But if just services to services, it's a little bit tougher to implement.
Ladies, thank you very much. I appreciate the testimonies. It's fascinating stuff. We could do it all day, but everybody's been here 3 hours, and I do apologize again for the long hearing. This committee will work to expand opportunities for small business and compete for federal contracts, both as prime and subcontractors. We'll keep in mind that there's a lot of room for improvement. Thank you specifically for your suggested improvements. Those will not go unheard of or unresponded to. Ms. Borromeo, thank you for this. This will be included in the record. And I think this really does help me and the ranking member try and get a feel for where we want to take this subcommittee, especially next year. So with that, I'll ask unanimous consent that we have 5 days to revise and extend our remarks or to ask questions of the witnesses. Again, witnesses, thank you very much. Thank you all for sticking around for 3 hours. Ms. Chu, it's always a pleasure. And with that, we will adjourn for the day.
Thank you.